Wolfman with Cat Friend. Dear Scary Stories NYC, for the last 2 summers, we have been treated to sightings of a werewolf or wolfman type animal who walks along with a small cat on his shoulder. We used to think it was a kitten the first season, but when it seemed to be exactly the same size last season too, we had to assume this must just be a small adult cat. It's just large enough and moves around enough that you can see it there, but none of us have gotten the greatest of looks at the kitty. Not my family anyway. Besides, if you're having a sighting that might last just a few seconds to maybe a minute, are you going to be more focused on the kitten or on the large dog-like man walking on his hind legs that's carrying the kitten on one of his massive NFL linebacker shoulders? I'm going to give you a few anecdotes from the experiences we've had, and some people we know have had. But first I want to say up front that we have no photos or videos of the creature. We had a photograph of a footprint, but that turned out to be a regular dog, even though a large one. And we had some fur, but that turned out to be from a wolf. An ordinary wolf, I mean to say. Some people tell me that maybe the creature we've been seeing is just an ordinary wolf, and maybe it walks on its hind legs because its front legs got injured. Well, those front legs are not legs at all, but arms. They hang at his sides, and they don't end in dog paws like legs do. This creature has these sort of claws, I guess you could call them. Like hands, but not like hands. The most important thing about everyone's description of this creature is that he's always so far been seen carrying the little cat on his shoulder. Dogs with injured front legs don't have shoulders. This creature does. It's not an ordinary dog or an ordinary wolf. It's something different. And I guess it's what people colloquially call a real werewolf, or a wolfman, or a dogman. But this one's head looks more wolf-like to me than anything else. We are looking forward to this upcoming summer season, and we've invested in camera gear in the hopes of capturing some evidence this time. The first year it happened, we were taken by surprise, and to be honest, we never expected to see the 2 critters again for a second year. But now that it's happened 2 years in a row, we are taking the situation more seriously. These were not easy decisions for us to make. Besides the monetary expenditure, if we do capture real evidence, that we won't be able to stay anonymous any longer. We've decided we don't want to do that unless we get some very good evidence, so that people can't just call us crazy. Until then, I'm only going to say that we live in a rural area in the Midwest. We are in the woods near a body of fresh water, and I believe that is why we've seen these creatures during summer months. We're apparently on their route to and from getting something to drink. I don't know where they walk back to, but I hope it remains that location for at least 1 more year, so that we have a chance of getting proof. If their destination from the watering hole next season varies by even a few degrees, they might avoid our property entirely. When I say our property, I'm referring to the remote location we've been summering at since the pandemic. It's a bit of a unique situation. My wife's friend from her job got in on some rural property for a very cheap price, and was also able to get log cabins constructed on the property as part of his deal. We have 5 cabins up here that are split between 5 families, although we've only had all 5 families here at the same time once. It's a bit too rugged a location for us to stay in during the winter, but in the summer you'll often find 3 or 4 out of the 5 cabins in use by various members of the different families who all went in on buying this property. So this is not a story of the Dogman invading a human settlement. It's more a story about people building summer homes on the Dogman's turf. So the first time any of us saw these creatures, the kitten was on our window in the middle of the night, playing with some part of it that must have come loose. It was tapping at the window until my wife got up to look at it. She said, "Oh, it's a little kitty." So then I got up to come around and look at the kitty on the other side of our window. Only when I came up around behind my wife, I got a better view of what was outside that window than she did. There was a truly large, big, huge, immense monster of a dog, and he was bent over looking at something. It later turned out to be a very large bag of onions that we had picked up at the supply store. I had placed it down there planning on going back out to put it in our little root cellar later, but then I forgot about it. So now this bear-sized animal was looking into the bag, pulling out onions and trying to figure out why these things were collected there in that large bag. He didn't seem to like the smell of them at all, reacting with almost horror after taking a sniff. My wife didn't notice any of that though. She kept calling me over to the window, but I was kind of in a state of shock. There was some kind of werewolf monster just on the other side of that window that my wife was standing directly in front of. She was too focused on the little cat to notice the larger beast out there in the darkness behind it. When I saw my wife lean over to lift the window open and get at that kitty, I found my shocked state momentarily broken, and I quickly grabbed her from behind. My wife turned around, confused and annoyed, but when she saw the look on my face, she shut up and turned to see what I was staring at in such a horrified way. Well, of course, this time she noticed the Dogman, and she almost knocked me over when she backed away from the window that quickly. The wolf-headed Dogman appeared to be done with our onion bag, and he extended his arm, palm down, to the cat. First, the cat sniffed the clawed hand of the monster. Then it casually and playfully ran up the massive muscular arm and onto the Dogman's furry shoulder. And then the two of them left, and my wife and I stared after them, watching them go. If we hadn't both seen it together, I think we might have assumed we dreamt it. As it was, we had no choice but to accept that this strange occurrence was part of reality. We started to hear stories after that from the others in the area, that they had seen a tall two-legged bear with a wolf-like head, and that it traveled around with some kind of a tiny cat-like creature. Do you know what is a cat-like creature? A cat is a cat-like creature, and that is what was on this beast's shoulder. One couple told us that they were barbecuing in their backyard when the Dogman walked up with the cat perched on its shoulder like a parrot on the shoulder of a pirate. They had first told the story to sound like the vicious dog bear chased them inside, growling. But when I asked them for more specific details, it seems that the Dogman didn't really behave in a threatening way at all. They were cooking food and it walked over. That's all I know for certain. I asked if the creature threatened them in some specific way, but they just told me they ran inside as it approached. There was a crash outside, and later on, they found that their charcoal grill had been knocked over, and it seemed that the Dogman had figured out how to extract the meat from the burning coals successfully before leaving. Now, I took that story to be about a couple of curious animals drawn to the smell of food cooking, not an attack on their home by monsters, but everything is in the eye of the beholder, and my wife beheld crime and violence in our summer vacation spot. There was a heightening of tensions in the area, specifically among the women, and we husbands started to get harangued about why we hadn't culled all of nature yet for the convenience of our wives. The point of being in nature was to be in nature, not to expect the bears to stop being hungry, or the dogs, or whatever it is that thing is. I mean, he even came over to smell our onions, so that guy's hungry, and he is going to investigate the possibility of eating anything that smells even remotely digestible. But this is what you should expect to happen when you're summering in the woods. I don't mean you expect to have a Dogman nearby, but you shouldn't be surprised when predators and scavengers show up at your doorstep. We had a cousin of my wife's staying up here with us one weekend, and he saw a very strange thing. This guy is a teenager, and he'd been sent up by his parents, who were trying to get him to break up with a girl they disapproved of. He came to stay with us for a weekend, and actually he did it for a few weekends, and considering he wasn't there by his own choice, I thought he was well-mannered and a nice young guy. He would go for long walks in the woods alone, and that was fine with us, since we really didn't have too much to say to him, half our age and all. We warned him about wild animals, but we did not specifically tell him anything about the Dogman. So imagine our surprise when he came back from one of his walks through the woods, reporting that he had seen a very large man-like wolf. The story was that he was walking along when he saw a strange dog doing something weird on the ground by a small hill. The dog was whimpering and grunting, and our cousin stopped and hid himself so he could watch the scene for a while. He was wondering if the dog was injured or something, and he wanted to understand what was happening so he could decide what to do about it. Maybe the dog needed medical attention or something like that. So as he watched, and as his eyes adjusted to the darkness under the tree cover better, he began to understand that the creature was actually reaching on its front legs into a hole in the dirt side of the hill. Like maybe it was a rabbit hole or something, and this dog was reaching into it in the way a man might. The more he looked at the posture of the creature, the less it made sense how he was splaying his front leg out sideways like that. Our cousin was about to move to a different position to try to get a clearer perspective when there was a sudden flurry of movement. The canine simultaneously withdrew his arm from the hole and drew his body up to stand on his hind legs, like a bear does. Then the paw which had been in the hole in the hill opened, and several small white rodents fell and ran down his arm onto the forest floor. There the mice were met with a cat, which began hurriedly chasing them in circles until it nabbed one and began tormenting it to death in that extra cute way that only cats can do it. While the cat was doing that, the canine began playing whack-a-mole with the other mice, who ran around trying to avoid his slapping hand that was far larger than it should have been if it was a dog paw. The longer our cousin looked at this scene, the less it made sense to him, and yet this is what he swore to us that he saw. My wife and I didn't really need any convincing. We told him we had seen the werewolf with its pet cat ourselves. Well, that was the last time that cousin was sent to us by his parents. When they heard that we believed his story about a wolfman and his pet cat, they assumed we were on drugs and a bad influence for their kid. We would have argued the point, but it's not like we relished having to take care of someone else's teenager randomly. Fine, call us crazy. There's a neighbor up here that brings her cat with her from the city up to the cabin. She told me that the Dogman's cat came into her yard alone one time, and she fed it some of her cat's food. She thought it was a stray, and was considering taking it in, when out of the blue, the bushes parted, and this huge man with a wolf's head walked majestically into her backyard. That was the word she used, majestically. It held its head high, and it walked looking around as though this were all its land that it was surveying. It had a regal nature, and when the cat saw this creature approaching, she or he stopped eating and ran toward the big monster like a puppy greeting its master coming home from work. The big bear dog leaned a bit over, offering the cat the back of its furry arm. The little feline leaped onto the arm and began clawing its way up to the big bear-like canine's shoulder. And then the two of them slowly strolled off, with the cat turning in circles getting comfortable, up in that bed of shaggy fur up there 7 feet in the sky. That was the last time that lady offered food when she saw the cat. From then on, she told me, she got in the habit of running inside, if she so much as heard a meowing off in the distance. But again, I would like to point out that the Dogman or a werewolf or whatever it is didn't actually do anything to that lady either. I recognize that he is large, and that people are naturally afraid of what is larger than they are, but I don't hear about the creature even making eye contact with people, let alone threatening them. He seems to just live nearby, and he doesn't seem all that vicious, at least not toward mankind. Cats are often good judges of character, and this one seems to rely on the big beast for an awful lot. It was just a few days before we left back for the city in late August of last year, when my wife had some stuff delivered, I forget what. Something to do with her garden in the back. I came to the door to take in the delivery from the man. He appeared to be shaken up or disturbed in some way. I offered him water, and he began asking me if there were an alternate route back to the highway. I apologized that there was only one way into and out of those woods by vehicle, and I asked him what the problem was. That was when he told me a strange little story. On the way driving through the woods from the highway to get to our cabins, the driver was forced to stop when he came across what he at first thought was a bear, standing upright, looking at some branches of a tree that overhung the road. He was blocking the right lane of the 2-lane road, and even though there was no other traffic in the area, the driver didn't feel safe driving that closely to try to pass in the opposite lane. The delivery guy gulped down all his water and asked for more before continuing with this story. I asked him what the beast was staring at in the tree, and the guy almost spit out his water in exasperation. He was like, "That's what I wanted to know." But more than the fact that his delivery was being delayed and his time wasted, this guy seemed really upset by what the creature looked like. I mean, he was shaking, and there were points when he had to slow down and stop himself from getting choked up in front of me. He kept telling me it looked like something from a movie about werewolves, but each time he said something like that, he looked like he wanted to cry or to scream. Well, at least now I understood why he was afraid to drive back to the highway. I felt like telling him that I didn't think the creature was dangerous, but I had already said that to a couple of other witnesses, and it only got them angry at me. When someone is scared of something, they don't want to hear that there's nothing to be scared of. They've already decided differently on that matter, and they don't want to have their opinions and feelings insulted. So I kept my lips zipped, and I encouraged the delivery guy to continue with his story. He said he was about to back up and make a U-turn out of there when the big werewolf thing suddenly reached up into the tree, like he was looking to grab something in there. The young guy turned to me with wide eyes and he said, "You'll never guess what he grabbed up in that tree." I guessed anyway. Was it a kitten? A little cat? The guy looked at me like I was the amazing Kreskin or something, and he asked me how I knew. "I live around here all summer," I told him. But then I told him that werewolf walks around with the cat all the time. He looked relieved. He thought when he saw the big dog walking off carrying the little cat into the woods, he was going to eat the little guy. I assured him that the two of them were good friends, and the guy seemed to start to come back into himself a little bit. I hopped in our car to drive ahead of him back to the highway, so he wouldn't be so scared. But we didn't see either of those animals again that season. We're cautiously optimistic that with the new trail cameras we're bringing up with us in July, that we will capture some interesting imagery. I have 7 cameras in total, and 3 of the trail cameras I want to move around every few days. Keep putting them in different spots, including ones with views of the freshwater pond near us that I think they drink at. I have heard a lot about Dogman knowing how to avoid game trail photography, but maybe moving the cameras randomly will yield some results. I don't know, it's just something I'd like to try. If we do get something, I'm not sure what we'll do with it. Send it to William Shatner? I mean, what do you do with paranormal footage in current year? It's too early to think about that anyway, since we don't know if the creatures will even put in a return appearance this year at all. If they do, I'm sure you'll be hearing about what happened to us somewhere soon enough. You can search the whole world over, but you'll never find another Stel Cordova. Please join us in thanking the kind and wonderful Stel Cordova for being a member of our PayPal subscribers club, which she joined at peterbernard.com. It has the same perks as our channel membership club here on YouTube, and the main one is our secret uncensored Dogman and werewolf stories that only members get to hear. This weekend, Sunday, we've got not 1 but 2 new scary members-only stories. And here to tell you about how you can see these secret episodes is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hanky. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.